Dear viewers, welcome to yet another edition of Expert Speaks. In this episode, I have picked up a topic that you have asked me to speak on: the problem of transfer of inheritance in the unfortunate event of demise of parents for NRIs. It's a very complex subject. It involves professionals, it involves documentation, it involves multiple steps. Sometimes it can get too complicated. So in this episode, Expert of the Week, Mr. Nikhil Varghese, the inheritance specialist, is going to talk to you about how you can go about it, what are the things that you need to be doing well ahead of time, and if you were to be in a situation where inheritance has to be transferred, what are the steps that need to be taken. All these issues we are going to discuss during this episode. Stay till the end. Every point that we discuss here is very, very important. This is NRI Money Clinic for you, and I'm Dr. Chandrakant, your financial guide for a happy living.
NRI Money Clinic. No hype, just the right advice.
Dear viewers, to talk about the inheritance-related issues, who can be better than my eminent faculty, Mr. Nikhil Varghese, who is a specialist in the inheritance-related topic. He has been on the channel multiple number of times. He regularly talks to you all about the various aspects of will creation, execution of trust, and related topic on my channel at regular intervals of time. He needs no introduction. He is popular amongst the NRIs. He has helped countless NRIs in this journey. But for those of you who are viewing him for the first time, let me give a brief introduction of Mr. Nikhil Varghese. He is a chartered accountant by profession. He has the experience of working with Big Four, a man who has headed the South India division of a popular wealth management firm before he started his journey with a startup called Yellow, which is dedicated to providing digital solution in the field of creation of wills and related topic. Welcome to the show, Mr. Nikhil Varghese.
Thank you, Dr. Butt. It's always a pleasure to be part of your show. And thank you once again to invite me back and give me an opportunity to once again interact with your audience. It's always a pleasure, sir.
We have a lot of questions for you, Nikhil, today, and we might take a little bit of a time because it's a very complex subject and there are a lot of issues that need to be discussed. Let us try to do this episode as concise as possible, as simple as possible. Those people who really want a service around that can always reach out to you. We'll take up a few questions. I have got quite a few questions for you to ask for. As an introduction, what is this inheritance problem that the NRIs are facing? Many people leave India and become NRIs and pursue their careers in some part of the world. And in future, parents leaving behind a lot of inheritance for these children to acquire. Indians, more than enjoying the wealth, are very in the habit of accumulating wealth for their children. And most of the times for these NRIs, this wealth itself can become a problem, because they live in some part of the world. They can't come to India. When they come to India, things will not fall in place. They don't know the rules, regulations, procedure, whom to contact, what to do, what not to do. Nothing is known. Let's try and do this video with a step-by-step guide in understanding the problems related to inheritance. My first question is, what's inheritance? What problems might happen when such a situation would evolve? Over to you.
No, absolutely great question, Dr. Bhatt, about inheritance and specifically the issues that NRIs face. And it nicely you summed up saying that in Indians as a mentality, dedicate more time to kind of collate wealth, create a larger wealth that can be passed on to the next generation. The good amount of priority that is put together for creation of wealth, right? But unfortunately, while the entire effort is put towards building that corpus for yourself and for your future generation, often the whole aspect of how to seamlessly pass this on to the next generation, what are the tools to use, etc., is usually kind of ignored and not place much importance. And that kind of creates the overall problem of inheritance. Now, what is the concept of inheritance? Is very simple. The term itself is clean to say that what happens when one passes away, how does one's asset, be it real estate, be it financial assets, how does it pass to his or her loved ones? right? Could be family, could be non-family, whoever you want to transfer the asset, that needs to be transferred, right? But while the issue is common for whether NRI or non-NRIs, the issue kind of get amplified for NRIs because of the remote jurisdictions, right? You're not in the close proximity, and therefore overall process becomes much more difficult because you need to spend time and money and effort in India to get some of these things sorted. What are the aspects that we're talking about, right? Essentially, when you don't have a will, or rather when you don't have a plan for inheritance, assets are not transferred as per your wishes, right? Your wishes, or rather, let me step back. In India, there are only two ways one can pass away, right? With a will or without a will, right? With a will, when you pass away, your issues are clearly laid down, or rather your wishes are clearly laid down, your assets are clearly specified, and therefore you have a clear guidance of how the asset needs to be transferred. When you don't have a will, then your archaic, personal laws which are dated 1925, 1956 comes into the picture, which defines how your asset needs to be distributed basis gender, basis religion, and which jurisdiction you kind of fall under, right? Now that kind of deals with one, wishes are not clearly captured. Second is that because of no clarity, there are various aspects that you need to do on the ground. Things like getting a succession certificate, Pedi Nama, Varisu certificate, the terminologies kind of change depending on jurisdictions. What is the value of the assets? All of those kind of change, and the nature of asset kind of change. What exactly are these documents needed becomes extremely complex. You being as in kids of NRI parents sitting outside India, one may not be fully clued to kind of what is happening in India. Many times that is a reality because you've left India, been outside for 15, 20 years. Things have changed. You don't know what on the reality, the ground aspects are. Sometimes it's a surprise to you that some of these are very efficient. Sometimes you still realize what is happening, right? So therefore, when you're not there, and when you're not here, the complexity kind of increases. And I have a client of mine who was in the US, parents passed away. He had to spend 6 to 8 months in India to figure out what these assets were, right? To kind of avoid all of this is where you need to plan some, or rather bring in some tools of estate planning to minimize some of these efforts. And that's something which you as NRI kids staying outside should tell your parents, that creating wealth is great. I know I am taken care of, but if I have to be really taken care of, there is one additional simple step that needs to be taken, is plan for my estate.
So it's high time children also tell their parents, look, if you really want to help me, then create that will and make my life more simple whenever you leave this world. Probably that information has to be passed on. Nikhil, you mentioned about assets being transferred with a will or in the absence of a will by succession certificate and other things. But the crucial question is, in case of parents, not many are internet savvy, not many are familiar with it. The very thought of talking about a will can become very sensitive issue. But finally, the work has to be done. How can somebody simplify the whole will creation exercise? Can children guide the parents, or is there a way they can nudge parents to do this? You have been working day in and day out. Your life revolves around creating wills. It's your daily routine. What do you have for the benefit of our viewers?
Very good question that you had, Dr. Bhatt. Of course, we deal with creation of wills day in, day out. Our platform eases the entire aspect of will making. Interesting point that you raised is that usually parents are elders, may not be tech savvy, and how do you ensure something on these lines can be taken care of? Interesting point with us, though we have a tech platform, of course, we do things offline as well. On the tech platform, we have people at the age of 93 making wills. So therefore, I don't think age is a barrier. It's the more you look at elders today or the seniors, they are more and more becoming internet or tech savvy, and they are adapting to the need for embracing technology and be more current with dealing with many of these things. Of course, the way they deal with it could be a little slower, but they are adopting it, and therefore it's not a big deal. But stepping aside and saying, what is it that is needed for creating a will? Very honestly, there's no format for a will in India, right? You could cast your wishes and sign it along with two witnesses, and that becomes a valid document. So, very important point to make a will in India, to make it legally valid, is that you need to cast your wish. That's point number one. You need to be above 18 years of age, and you need to have at least two witnesses to ensure that you have signed the will in their presence. That makes the will legally valid. You don't need to register. You don't need to get it on a stamp paper. You don't need to notarize it. All of these are nothing which is specified under law. Without doing all of it, it is a still legally valid will. Sometimes registration, etc., helps if you have real estate properties, etc., in India. Having said that, if once you create a will, it easily smoothens the entire process, because you don't need to now run around saying going by the interstate asset transfer route, which is nothing but when one passes away without a will. Now you have your wishes in place, you have your will in place, your assets are listed out in the will, which gives complete clarity for your kids abroad, or for other way around. If you look at NRI kids having parents in India, you have complete access of all the assets, and now it's only a process of recovery or transfer of those assets in your name. Therefore, it becomes much more simpler as compared to one figuring out what my parents' assets are, and next step of saying, okay, once this is done, what are those additional documents, running around getting some of these basic documents of succession certificate, etc., itself takes months to years, right? And thereafter is when you start getting access to the assets. All those can get simplified. Plus, of course, creating a will is always a first and a fundamental step of an estate plan. But with NRI situations where family members are in jurisdictions which could have exposures to estate duties and other jurisdictions, and depending on the values, fact patterns, you may want to look at beyond a will as well. Will, of course, is important, but will plus maybe a trust structure, etc., is something which one you could consider if you want to plan beyond just asset transfer, but also to mitigate some of the very regressive estate duty implications that may be prevalent in your country.
Nikhil, these are very, very valid points. Parents love their children, no doubt. But one of the best ways to tell that you love your children is two ways. Number one, as you said, create a will, make their life simple. It's definitely not easy. Let's say somebody is living in US and the parents pass away. Coming here, spending time, it's not a joke. It takes time, and you go to an extent that let inheritance go to dogs. That's the kind of feelings the children might get it. So parents have to do two things if you really love your children. Number one, don't depend on your children for financial support. Build your good retirement corpus yourself, and don't worry about getting any help from your children for financial assistance. Second is drop a will, or at least crystal clear, tell your children, document it so well, what you have got, where you have got, how it has to be handled, and prepare your exit yourself. That's the right thing to do. And that's where you are really giving an impression that you will not make the life of your children much more difficult. Nikhil, these are my heartfelt feelings on behalf of parents, what they need to be doing. My question to you is, wills is one thing which you spoke about. Are there other things that parents can do for smooth transfer of inheritance? You also mentioned about the trust, but are there other things that parents can do about it?
No, great point, Dr. Bhatt, in terms of your comment, especially while I'll go to the tools. It's a extremely important comment, right? You need to often we have seen situations, and one of the tools again is gifting is one such tool which is there, and parents in their later part of their life become so sometimes gullible, sometimes very naive to kind of gift everything to kids, and you don't want to be the next Singania, right? Wherein you've gifted assets and then tomorrow you're waiting for them to assist you or taking things matters to the court because you're not being supported. Absolutely with you. If it's you have built the asset, you should have complete control of those assets during your life, and that's where will plays a very important role of losing control only on demise. Until then, it's your asset. Nobody can touch those assets, right? But that said, multiple other tools that is available for estate plan, which typically I don't think are the great tools. in our mind, will and trust are the best case scenarios. Gifting to some extent can be done event based, say for an wedding, birth of a kid, etc. You could have small components of gifts done, but don't gift your assets entirely to kids. Nomination is another tool which people get confused saying that it's an estate plan, but nominee is not the owner, but helps tremendously with the recovery of the assets post demise. Therefore, nomination is something one should definitely do. Align your nomination with your will so that tomorrow family members can easily access these assets without too much concern. Sometimes joint accounts, etc., are also looked as an estate planning tool. It works in for one party, etc. It doesn't work like a full-fledged estate plan, and therefore between husband and spouse, probably a joint account can be looked at. Again, here either a survivor is more important and not a plain vanilla joint account. That doesn't help from estate plan. Either a survivor sometimes helps you with seamless transfer of assets to spouse when the other spouse is not around. Thereafter, still that asset from the spouse has to go to kids or your loved ones, and for that a will is still important, right? So these tools that I'm talking about, apart from will and trust, are complementary to some extent, are not a full-fledged tool and can be used on a case-to-case basis. But foundation is always create a will. Even if you have joint accounts, even if you have nomination, etc., list those assets, talk about your wishes so that tomorrow, if any conflicts come around, who should get these access, your will kind of gives you complete clarity on what your wishes are.
I'm fully in agreement with you, Nikhil. And I keep telling my clients, people who keep, are requesting for our service, life should become more and more simple when you cross 60 years of age. What's the point in having multiple properties in different geographies when your bones are aching and you can't move around all these places? And how can your children who is living across seas come and take care of all these things? When you cross 60, when you are 65 and above, dementia, Alzheimer's, you are living under the mercy of God. What will happen in your life, God alone knows. It makes absolute sense for you to keep things in a very simplified form. Don't have too many bank accounts, don't have too many properties, simplify it. If you need them, you keep them, and if whatever you keep them, document it very well. And probably I will not be wrong to say that if you keep everything in one small chit and if it is there in your pocket, that could be the simplest life that you can lead. There's no need to be having too many things spread over all over the place. Why complicate your life? Your requirements in life keep coming down as you move to the other end of the life. So it's probably best people simplify, document it, make it known, make it simple for your children whenever that day comes.
Absolutely great point, Dr. Bhatt. In terms of simplifying things, this is something which we have commonly seen during my yellow days as well as in my previous avatar with HNIs, ultra HNIs, that in India, people have the tendency to hoard tangible real estate, right? We feel that is the best asset class with appreciation. Maybe may not be true depending on jurisdiction, but I think you're the right person to advise on that part. But having said that, purely looking at it from family members, NRI kids who are abroad, where that there's a 100% or a more or less certainty that your kids are not going to come back to India, and they're pretty much settled offshore. In that case, having real estate becomes an extremely painful process for them to maintain these properties, recover these assets. It becomes extremely painful, right? For that reason alone, we have seen high tendency these days for parents in India to kind of keep their assets profile very light from real estate and move all of those into financial assets, because that is easily accessible, manageable, and repatriable for NRI kids, right? And therefore, that is something which we see as a trend. And it also really helps your family when situations arises, because we have seen kids give up access to these real estate properties because it's extremely painful to manage, and it's not their cup of tea, and they think we're better off than not having these assets. And that's something which should not be the case. You have build this with your blood and sweat, and it should not go into vain, right? And therefore, some bit of simplifying things, recalibrating what your assets should be as you grow is something which is important. We have seen extreme cases where parents have completely given up all the real estate, everything in financial assets and in rented properties, so that if tomorrow if something were to happen to them, because that is certain, something will happen at some point in time, but kids don't need to worry. It's easily accessible to them.
I'll tell you some of the things we did for our clients. So we have seen this problem, and this is a rampant problem. This is not a small problem. There are people who have got 8 properties, 9 properties. That's okay if it is, even if it is there in one single place. It has been spread across geographies. How can you control it? And parent is 65, 70 years old, and when we advise them, you better sell it off, they say, no, it's not a time to sell, and you still get a better rate. What is that you are hoping for at that particular age to sell it off? You are looking at the end of the life there. This is the time you simplify things. One of the things what we did was we tied up with another company like your startup called Strata, which is in the fractional commercial real estate business. So we advise people, look, get rid of this real estate. We'll solve all the problems, and the cash, whatever you get, you put it in the fractional commercial real estate. Instead of owning a physical real estate, now it will become something like an electronical mode where you are holding it. Now you don't have the required amount of cash to make a living. The rents you get from commercial real estate could be very high, and you can nominate your children as per your wish, and you can divide it between children if you have multiple children, and it becomes like very simple. Initially, there was a hesitancy, but over a period of time, they realize this makes an absolutely good sense for them. It gives you better cash flows. You don't have to find a tenant. You don't have to run behind things. You just nominate and things will happen quite easily. And in the absence of parents, will smoothly move on to the kids as per their wish. Mr. Nikhil, you spoke about this, but life is not as simple as we all figure it out. Sometimes the complexities will creep in. I'll tell you the example. There is an NRI who is living in some part of the world. Normally, the parents live in India, but out of their love, they want parents to be closer to them, and these children will ask parents to come and live with them, or they have just visited on a visit visa. If the demise were to happen in another country, the inheritance, are there more complexities around that? Are there more things that have to be looked into if parents are not in India at the time of demise?
Extremely sensitive topic you've touched upon. And I'm glad that you're also, I'm sure these are situations that some of your clients would have faced, and it is not an uncommon scenario. These are common scenarios, right? Typically, we've seen that when both parents are around, they are in India, but when one of them pass away, then situation arises that they want to have to stay with kids, etc., or maybe they may be floating with multiple kids in multiple jurisdictions, and demise could happen in an offshore jurisdiction. This can, in a way, arise some sort of complexity depending on the jurisdiction where you pass away and where your kids are, right? Another rolling fact here is that what is your citizenship PR status? What happens is, let's say if you move to Canada and your kids will say, why don't you take your Canada PR so that visa issues are not there? I'll show you as a dependent and you can rely on my PR to get your own PR. All those things happens. Right? Now, the important fact pattern here is that let's simplify it in 2 parts, saying if you're an Indian citizen and if you're not an Indian citizen. If you're an Indian citizen, typically, and you're residing in India, typically when the assets goes to your kids, inheritance should not be, or rather inheritance tax should not arise. Inheritance complications we already spoken about, but what could happen in those jurisdictions is what we are talking now, right? If those jurisdictions have inheritance tax, typically it should not arise. But if the parents are also residing in those countries, some jurisdictions say the place of demise can also trigger inheritance tax. And if that combined with various factors such as was your usual place of residence, which is not by citizenship, but you have taken PR, or you're ensured that last X number of years you're staying with your kids, you're kind of showing that your tendency or permanency to stay in that jurisdiction has become or showcased to be higher, wherein you become, in a way, a deemed domicile of that jurisdiction. When you become a deemed domicile, if inheritance tax laws are applicable in those countries, it could perhaps come in. I'm not saying it's automatic, 100% it will happen. We need to look at which jurisdiction, what laws exist, but this could raise another complexity of Indian assets also being subject to inheritance tax in the offshore jurisdictions. right? So therefore, that complexity can arise. So depending on whether you're Indian citizen, if you're given up Indian citizenship, if you have a PR, all of this, multi-fact pattern manner, we need to evaluate to see will there be an additional tax outlay in your kids' jurisdiction where you're residing, to see if there's a additional tax outlay at all from an inheritance perspective.
So if the parents were to demise outside of India, it will open up a completely an open box. Anything could happen. And depending on which country you are in, what visa you have gone in, what could be your intention, everything opens up for an interpretation. So it makes absolute sense to make sure that things are put in place. Dear viewers, NRI Money Clinic is there to help you in all these activities. We have already tied up with Yellow, and countless NRIs have used our services to create a will or transfer inherited assets to you, or in creation of trust to smoothen the journey from one generation to another generation, as well as bring down the tax incidence to the best possible levels. If you're somebody who is having sizable assets in India in the form of inheritance of your parents, it's time you speak to your parents. Also work around creating the wills and see what best you can do today to smoothen this journey of future. Do not hesitate. You can reach out to us through a WhatsApp message. We have provided a link here in the description box. Click on the description box, the link, and it will take you to the WhatsApp. Send us a message if you have inheritance related issues, and you can get the best discounts from Team Yellow in Bangalore if you are coming through NRI Money Clinic. Do not put this thing for a future day. No one knows what can happen tomorrow. Take that action today. Nikhil, we can keep talking on and on and on and on with inheritance. It goes like, Ramayana and Mahabharata, an epic story to discuss upon. We need to close. Finally, before I conclude, can you give me the bullet points? These are the must-to-do things. These are the things you work on today to smoothen this journey of inheritance transfer.
Absolutely. As in, like you said, it's a very open-ended topic. We can, have multiple facts-based conversations here, and it can go on and on. But having said that, specifically for, the NRI community that we are talking to, be it kids or parents looking at transferring these assets, very simple. If I have to conclude in one point, create a will. That helps, right? You should have created a will as of yesterday and not looking at doing this in the future at some point in time. We have a platform that will help you create a will, like you rightly said, that's available, easily accessible. Links of it will be part of the description, where you can access, or you can reach out to your WhatsApp group to get this done. But that said, some of the important pointers that needs to be looked at while creating a will is that just having a piece of paper and your wishes is a good will. Rather, it is a valid will, but is it really a good will becomes a question mark. Because if I say all my assets goes to my spouse, it's a valid document. Does my spouse have visibility of what are these assets, right? If I can stick my neck out and say 95 plus percentage of the audience here would not have complete data given to your kids' family members about the assets that you own, which would mean that you're always keeping a high possibility of assets getting not being discovered by your family, and therefore forming part of the huge unclaimed asset pool in the country, which is close to 150,000 crores in India today. So don't get to that. Create a will which is a robust one with entire listing of your assets, and that will help your family members. The point number one. Second, think through about what is that objectives that you need to achieve. Right? Seamless transfer is one aspect of things. If your other aspects of looking at planning for incapacitation, planning for control, so that assets are available to the family members at a staggered duration, etc., or even ring fencing from any potential financial exposure, trust, etc., is aspects that you could explore along with a will. And here also when your family members are in jurisdiction which has estate duty implications, planning becomes very, very pertinent. And that's something which you need to talk to experts and get a consultation before you create something. It's not something you can get out of Google. I can't even say I had 2 cases where facts were similar and we could just use same document and get it done. It'll never happen. Each family has their own complexity. You need to have a customized plan when you're looking at trust, etc. And experts will give you practical knowledge of what happens and not theoretical knowledge if you have dealt with multiple families. Third is that jurisdictional complexities of where do you want to be at later part of your life will determine what planning needs to be done. Plus, the aspect of how to keep assets light is very important. We spoke about it. Keep it as light as possible so that ease of access is available to your kids, right? And more important than all of it is that communication is very, very important, right? You did all of this, best practices, created a will, etc. Does your family know about the will in place, right? You need to communicate about the assets that you own. Sometimes family dynamics doesn't let you do it. At least know, somebody should know about these existence, so that when the event arises, they can show up the document of the, which is a will, and start the overall asset transfer process, right? With all these aspects in mind is where we have created our platform Yellow, which helps numerous families with respect to their estate planning needs. You don't need to meet a lawyer. You don't need to go to their office. Everything can happen at the comfort of your home through the platform that we have built, be it your app on your mobile, or you can just, if you think, no, I don't want to deal with mobile apps, I want to use a website. Our website also provides you access to create a robust will. What the simplified way in which we have gone about is that you don't need to worry about legal aspects. You need to talk about your family situations, your situation, your life situations. And without you knowing, a very, very robust will comes as an output. All that you need to do is sign along with two witnesses. It becomes a legally valid document. You want to do any further, build further robustness, which we give as instructions as part of our kit, we can help you with all of those aspects. That is during life. You could also help your family's post demise as well. Is that you could subscribe to our post demise coverage, executor support coverage that we have. We call it Yellow Smart. You could do it, or when the situation arises, your kids abroad could reach out to us, and while they are at their comfort at their home and dealing with the loss of their parents, they don't need to worry about the complexity that needs to be dealt with India with the overall asset transfer. We can do the entire runaround on their behalf and help families with the overall transfer of assets. We are helping another family. I can take an example of a UK based client. Their loved one in northern part of India in a tier 2 town passed away. Family is in UK. Ideal scenarios, they spent months and years in India to help with the overall transfer of assets. But fortunately, they have reached out to us. The good part is that they are in the UK, continuing to be in UK with the help of their distant relatives in India with some formalities. We are getting the overall asset transfer done for their families in the remote scenario, so that their opportunity cost is not something that they need to be worried about. They can continue doing their business, employment, etc. in offshore jurisdictions. We do the entire runaround on their behalf, so that asset transfer becomes smooth, and they don't need to worry about the Indian complexities, which usually is very intimidating for NRIs.
So I won't be wrong if I say, if somebody is saddled with similar situation, instead of thinking what to do, the best way is reach out to us through a message, and we'll see what best we can do. Of course, it's a commercial business to Yellow, but it will smoothen. But staying away from the country where you are living, giving up your holidays, or losing too much of a time around, probably you could explore these particular possibilities. Mr. Nikhil, thank you very much, and I feel that it's a ray of hope for NRIs to use these services for sorting out these problems which are there in transferring of assets. Thank you very much for your time and briefing our audiences on the possibilities, on the precautionary measures and the preventive steps that they can take to smoothen this journey of transferring assets from parents to children. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure, Dr. Bhatt, to once again invite me on your honorable show. And I hope we can interact in the future again and come up with some more or address more interesting topics that may be of value to your NRI audience. My pleasure, and look forward to seeing you all once again. Thank you.
Dear viewers, hope the video that I have done today could have given you answers about how the inheritance can be transferred to your names when the parents' demise happens. If it did give you the directions and area of hope, do like this video. If you are a person who is watching my channel for the first time, or if you are yet to subscribe for the channel, please hit the subscribe button and press the bell icon. Don't forget to share these videos with your near and dear ones, friends and relatives, and on the WhatsApp groups where you are connected with. Thank you very much for watching this episode on NRI Money Clinic. I shall be back with you with yet another topic, with yet another expert next Tuesday. Till then, stay safe. Jai Hind.
Press the bell icon for more details and subscribe our channel.